Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Big Jiu-Jitsu Show. I'm Rob.
I'm Randy.
We have another special guest with us today. We have Mr. Jay Pages here from Phoenix or Tempe, Arizona, if I want to be
Yep.
very specific about it. So, Jay, thanks for
Yep.
coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, guys. I love doing podcasts and just chit-chatting about jiu-jitsu and everything. So that's always an honor that, someone wants to talk to me.
Yeah, anytime. So before we get started with all the questions that Randy and I have, been wanting to ask, why don't you give the listeners kind of a, background of like how you got started in martial arts and,
Sure.
your journey from all the way up to where you are now?
Sure. So my journey in martial arts started probably about when I was 4. So I'm Filipino, Chamorro, and a bit of Samoan. And so my parents are all my family's all from the Philippines. But so my dad didn't come over from the Philippines until I was about 4. And my dad and his brothers were very heavily into martial arts, whether it was either boxing, kung fu, or stick fighting. My dad was more into the stick fighting when he was growing up, and that in his part of the region where the island that he was from, they're really well known for their stick fighting. And so that's kind of how I got into it. Was just playing and tinkering here and there with my dad, and broomsticks, whatever the case may be. But then I really didn't start taking martial arts seriously till I was probably closer to 10. But it was something that's always interested me, from all the Bruce Lee movies and B-rated ninja kung fu movies that were out there in the 80s. So, I started taking it seriously when I got punked as a kid, for my quarters at an arcade. I think a lot of listeners today probably won't know what that is. I think I'm aging myself right now. We used to go to a place where we play video games, put a quarter in the machine, and but yeah, so I got then my parents wanted me to get more serious in martial arts, and it just kind of started going from there. Just getting more and more into martial arts. I got heavily into kung fu growing up. Got into probably when I was like 17. I started 15 is when I started really wanting to get into like more like combat, like related, a little heavier, not flashy, martial arts. So I got into like JKD. And that's where I kind of like my jiu-jitsu journey started. So about 93-ish, end of 93, like after the UFC. That was like, it's pretty much everyone from my era. That was like everyone's introduction into it. Unless you were blessed, living in California, Southern California, and knowing any of the Gracies, that was our introduction. My coach that I trained with in JKD, he used to go to the Torrance Academy like once every 3 weeks, and whatever he'd learned, he'd bring it back to us. But the core of our grappling that we did in that JKD was like shoot wrestling or shuto, and a bit of whatever he learned from the Gracies back in Torrance. And then from there, I started getting more into jiu-jitsu when I moved out to Arizona for college. And I actually started fighting too. I fought in the very first MMA event ever held here in Arizona. And it was also the first fight of that night too. So I was in a very ground roots, part of, Arizona when it came to jiu-jitsu and MMA. When I was started, or when I was getting into it or involved, there was probably one black belt, one brown belt, and a handful of blue belts teaching in the whole state. And that was kind of like where it all, kind of spawned from. And now it's like jiu-jitsu schools on every corner now. But it's kind of generally speaking, that's kind of where, I started and where I'm at right now. I've seen and watched the whole jiu-jitsu community grow from where it started back when I first fought, and even before then till now. And it's a night and day difference.
Well, it is interesting because I know I didn't start so much like in the era you did, but I do remember, going and putting quarters in arcade games. So totally I do get that reference. So we have at least two people here who feel they've aged themselves in the conversation.
Yeah.
But no, it is interesting though. Back in the day, it was very much like we had one black belt in the area, and then I was pumped because my coach was a brown belt, and I felt like I had actually gotten real lucky with that. But now, like you said, it is amazing just the sheer amount of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools out there that are just readily available for people to train at, which is great to me, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I look at it today's like environment of jiu-jitsu. People are blessed, with like you said, the amount of black belts and the amount of information that everyone has access to these days. It's like I didn't have that like in the late 90s, and even early 2000s. Like for the better half of my journey, it's like I probably saw like a black belt maybe once a year, maybe if even that. Seeing a purple belt was also like seeing a unicorn. It was mostly just white and blue belts. My coach when I first started, he was a blue belt. And then we had to take what we got. Whether it was buying the Craig Kukuk, Kenzo Gracie tapes off, from Grappling Magazine or Black Belt Magazine, or getting a book, or just reading whatever from whatever people are putting out in their monthly magazines. That was my growth. So I think that's why like our growth and development back then from white to black was so long, is because of the access to information, and we just didn't have it. So like I think like my white to black belt journey was like closer to 13 years, where now the average is like 6-7 years, if even that.
Yeah, back when I first got into it, I mean, before I officially got into jiu-jitsu specifically, I'm kind of like you. I trained in a bunch of different systems. I started kind of more striking arts like kung fu, and then I got into a little bit of Thai boxing, and then did a little bit of just traditional Western boxing in back in Buffalo, where I'm from, and then kind of missed the martial arts part of it, so I kind of went back toward MMA as MMA was kind of blossoming. And one of my first actual real jiu-jitsu classes, believe it or not, was with Matt Serra in Long Island.
Oh,
because
wow.
I was growing up in Buffalo, and like you already kind of alluded to, there was not access to jiu-jitsu back then. You're talking early 2000s. There just wasn't a lot of jiu-jitsu spread like it is now, where every town you go to has got a jiu-jitsu academy pretty much.
Yeah.
I actually cold called Matt Serra's jiu-jitsu academy in Long Island. I was like 15 years old, 16 years old, and was more calling to see if they knew anybody that did jiu-jitsu in Buffalo. I mean, and I told them, I'm like, hey, I'm just calling. I'm from Buffalo. I know I'm not near you guys, but I'm just looking for a place to train to see if you know anybody in Buffalo that does jiu-jitsu. And they're like, well, why are you calling us on Long Island if you live in Buffalo? And I'm like, oh, Matt Serra's one of my favorite fighters. I watch him on UFC all the time. I just giving it a shot. And they were like, hey, hang on a minute. And they put me on hold. And the next person that picks up the phone is Matt Serra himself.
Oh, wow.
And so awesome. He's like, I heard you're a big fan, buddy, and just talks to me. And then before I know it, I'm making a trip out to Long Island on a weekend, and Matt Serra himself is picking me up from the hotel and driving me to his studio. And then like after training, we went out and had like some pasta in some Italian restaurant.
That's amazing.
That was my first official introduction to like real Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So pretty cool. But like you said, it just wasn't access everywhere. And, being able to talk to somebody like Matt Serra wasn't as hard back then as it is now, because UFC wasn't popular. He hadn't won the title yet. Like this was between his fight with Jeff Curran and Ivan Menjivar. So like his name hadn't like blown up yet. You know what I mean? So that's really cool to kind of hear how we all have similar stories.
Yeah.
I've definitely done the arcade thing. I used to win free games.
Yes.
I used to win free games against people playing Tekken. I would play Tekken, and I would basically do pool shark on people from freaking Tekken,
Oh, people don't know. They don't understand the difference of playing Tekken on your TV versus an arcade. Oh,
Yep.
there's something different about it.
I would fuck people up with a Lei Wu Long, bro. They couldn't deal with those kung fu styles, man.
No, and that and who was it? Eddie, the capoeira guy.
Oh,
Capoeira
yeah.
guy, yeah.
Yeah,
All the button masters like him, man. You know?
yeah, yep,
I was more of a Hwarang guy myself, just because I was doing Taekwondo at the time, and I was like, I have
yeah.
to stay true to the art, and like, it's
I
dumb.
liked the Law too. Law was cool.
Yeah, it was.
He was
Yeah,
really,
he
really
was.
quick. Yeah. Yeah.
But that is interesting, and it's funny too because I feel like it did kind of like martial arts at least was influenced a little bit by my video game choices and vice versa in a weird way too, because like we talk about our martial arts journey. I wrestled a little bit in high school. It's not good. I've said that multiple times, but then I fell into Taekwondo and striking art, and just moving into something maybe a little more realistic. Like while Taekwondo, like I still do a lot of stuff from it when I strike. It's just like I needed to get that contact, I guess is the best way to put it. So with that transition going from Jeet Kune Do, get into jiu-jitsu, and then finally getting into MMA and stuff like that. Did you still pull from a lot of the techniques and kind of mindset, maybe some training that you did previously to Brazilian jiu-jitsu and MMA in your MMA fights?
You know what? What's funny is you say that, and because my old Muay Thai coach, who trained me for all my fights, and I'm still good friends with him till today. Bob Carmel. He had a very similar kind of upbringing through JKD. So back in the day, with JKD, if you're not familiar with it, it's basically a conglomerate of a bunch of different martial arts and pulling from each martial art and kind of taking the Bruce Lee approach, getting rid of what's not useful, So typically in the curriculum of systems that are practiced in Jeet Kune Do, is obviously Jeet Kune Do, Kali or stick fighting, Muay Thai, Silat, and then you have Shuto or shoot wrestling back then. So, and then as we delve deeper into JKD, you'd find people started gravitating to one art or the other. So a lot of people stuck with JKD. A lot of people went Muay Thai route. A lot of people went the Shuto, shoot wrestling, and which are MMA route, and that's what I took, was the whole MMA shoot wrestling route. My Muay Thai coach went the Muay Thai route, but he studied heavily also in stick fighting as well, and a lot of that empty hand work that we did in stick fighting or in Kali or Eskrima, he had adapted it and brought it into the Muay Thai, like the clinch work and all of our blocking and parrying, and basically our dirty boxing work, for MMA. But it's definitely a lot of like I forgot what they called it in the Philippines, but a lot of empty hand work and a lot of clinching and like Filipino boxing involved.
That's cool. I'm glad that, you're able to incorporate all that stuff. I always find it interesting because I've met people and, you can tell kind of when somebody has a little bit of extra training doing certain kicks or whatever, or that helps out in your fighting and your competition. Kind of segue into another question, mainly about training and stuff like that. So when did you start your gym? Was it just wanted to start your own training academy, or, what was kind of the motivation behind that?
So I had no desires. I had no intentions of opening up a gym. I have my master's degree in marketing, and I had a great job. I was a mortgage broker, and I was making good money. And I loved the work when I was doing it. So what happened was, I was good friends with. This is going to age me again, but are you guys familiar with the band Lit? They sing "My Own Worst Enemy."
Yes, very much so.
A lot of their songs are on Rock Band and stuff, but The drummer, Alan Schallenberger, he is a good friend of mine. He partnered with a friend of his that he worked with, and they opened up a franchise in Arizona. They bought into a franchise and brought it to Arizona called LA Boxing. And basically, he at the time he needed coaches, part time. I'm like, oh yeah, all right, I'll help you out. Long story short, basically about 2008, I believe. The 2008 is the market started like dipping. My paychecks and everything was getting smaller and smaller. Writing loans were much harder, and basically I was making just as much money working part time, at Alan's gym. And so I was like, maybe I just do this full time and double my money. So I ended up getting out of the whole mortgage industry and went to teach full time, coach full time at LA Boxing. And unfortunately, he ended up getting diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, and he ended up passing away. And kind of about that time is when I ended up just like, my wife told me, maybe you should just open up your own place, and then I'm like, yeah, okay. We just borrowed some money from family and pulled the trigger, and I haven't looked back since.
Yeah, I've been to your gym a couple times, and that gym is I told this to Rob too, is my favorite
Yeah.
gym out of state.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Anytime I go find myself in Arizona, that is a must stop by gym. And that's one of the questions I had too, which is kind of a
Yeah.
perfect connection, is how did you build the culture in your gym? Because you've got a very outstanding gym culture at your spot where you highly competitive roles, good intense work, but nobody's a jerk, Like I
Yeah.
never felt like anybody was gonna just grip and rip and injure me, but everybody was very
Mm.
welcoming, just across the board, an awesome vibe. So how did you
Mm.
create that?
So it's something like I came up in like a type of culture I came up in with my old gym, and I wanted to continue and carry that same culture. And when in my team, and honestly, I did what everyone else isn't doing, meaning I made it I got rid of the strict rigidness of tradition in martial arts. There's no tradition in here, short of, respecting, the rank, beyond that, it's like no person's better than the other, regardless of rank, kind of thing. And it's just having the ability to lean on my other students to also help me create that culture. We're like really checking your ego, and continuously reminding is like, you're going to have hard rolls. You're going to get bumps and bruises. No one's trying to take your head. We're just trying to have fun, kind of thing. And really make that a constant reminder with everyone. It's like, there's no reason for you to get mad. I get caught all the time, there, and all you have to do is laugh. All you can do is laugh. And I tell them, again, it's a constant reminder. It's like if you get, can't get mad at it if somebody caught you. You take it as, an opportunity to collect data, kind of thing. And it's hard to really say how I did it. It just kind of like organically did it itself, just by the way I work with the students and work with the team, and how I communicate with the team, and how I guess run the class. I try to keep it serious, but at the same time I don't. I unfortunately curse a lot that my wife kind of gets on me about, but I think, and the joke, and I do joke around a lot when I'm when I'm coaching. So I think it kind of that also helps mitigate a lot of the seriousness in it. And like, we're here to have fun. If you're not having fun, what's the point? Why are you doing it? You want to get better. obviously that, that's our goal, one of our goals, but we want to have fun doing it. And if you're constantly aggro because you got tapped or swept or mounted or whatever, you know, maybe this spot isn't for you. And people that are pretty like can't get their egos in check. My guys, they get kind of sorted out pretty quick, and I think but I will say that I do lean on my guys a lot for that culture, so it's not just me, I may have started it, but the way I really lean on my most senior guys, is what helps me kind of carry out that message and carry out that vibe with everyone.
Yeah, it's really good because I'll say I was at the camp a couple weeks ago, the Globetrotters camp, and I was laughing with a couple of the guys that I was staying with. I was like, I know the people at the European camps, and like I show up to the
Mhm.
U.S. camp, I'm like trying to like talk to people, like I know a couple,
Yeah,
but not like
yeah,
I know some of the Europeans. But going out that first night with the barbecue, like it
yeah.
was your guys just pulling me over and talking to me. He's like, try this meat. It's really
Nice.
good. It was awesome. Like, it's a, and I think, and I'm
Yeah,
going to make an assumption here that it carries
yeah.
over to at least the competition side of the house too, with like how you're making it
Mhm.
fun and you get the
Yeah,
results that way too, right?
yeah, yeah. Because again, like it's like they work hard. Don't I won't make any mistakes about it. But it's they put the work in, but I also try to make it as fun as possible. Whether it's what we're a topic or just bullshitting basically, with in between rounds and stuff, and I kind of will sit there and feel the room. If it's too serious, I'll bullshit more. If they're running the way it's supposed to, that is the way I feel it should be, then I'll let them go about it. You're putting in the hard rounds, I continue. But if they get, I'll always check the temperature with the guys and readjust that with my seriousness or lack thereof. Because it's one thing. It's like I hate to say this, and like I don't know, like if people will take this wrong, your listeners, but like I said earlier before the podcast, I really don't care, what people think. You either like me or you don't like me, and I'll always be a respectful person, but but I think like what I joke around too much sometimes, and sometimes I feel like I might be offending someone. I hope I don't. But what's funny is like when I'm like coaching and teaching something, it's like I try to be serious about it and like go be right about it. And this is what you do, or this is how you move, this is where you put the arm, what yada yada yada. And people are still so fucking lost, right? You got that like look, the glazed look over their eyes, like any questions, huh? And I'm like, but the minute I sexualize it, the minute I make it gay as fuck or something, oh, they get it then. They understand now, So that's why sometimes I think I dick around too much, but I think it's that dicking around is what it piques their interest and it makes it stick, because I'm making them laugh, and they're seeing that it jujitsu doesn't have to be as serious as others will make it out to be. And I think the learning process and the educational process, if you can make it fun, if they enjoy it, will keep them coming back, and it'll keep the environment and the vibe lively. And again, people want to have fun, and like I said, if you're not having fun, what's the point of doing it?
I agree. I do the same thing because I teach a lot of stuff to law
Mm-hmm.
enforcement on the side. That's my main part of my job. I shouldn't even say on the
Mm-hmm.
job on the side. That's my main job is working law
Mm-hmm.
enforcement. But I teach the defensive tactics, and I constantly bring humor into the mix. And I used to
Mm-hmm.
question it. I used to say, "Man, maybe I need to be more professional. Maybe I need to clean
Mm-hmm.
it up a little bit and get better at my presentation and all this other stuff."
Mm-hmm.
Funny story, real brief. I even got pulled into a office by one of the lieutenants because of a comment I made during training. I had the guys doing push kicks. Like if we're going to breach a door, we're going to have to use like a push kick. And a lot of cops would just do like a front snap typing kick to try to kick doors open. Well, that shit's not going to work. So I told him, I said, come on, guys, like you got to go balls deep on this thing. And when I said that, when I said that, everybody's push kick immediately got better. Like immediately. Everybody's hips were coming forward, full drive.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? And so there was a lieutenant in the room, and after the class was over, he pulled me into his office, and he's like, come on, Randy, like, you're a good enough instructor. You don't need to talk like that. And I remember thinking about it for a second, and then I looked at him, and I said, all right, LT, I got it. Next time, just a tip. And that didn't go over very well. But it's what I learned in all this is exactly what you're saying. Like, I'm getting more buy-in. I'm getting more effort and enjoyment and like commitment to it by making them laugh and loosening them up a little bit, because if they're not, if you run a class and it's like you said earlier about tradition, right? Like I'm in the same boat. I've kind of thrown all that out too, right? Yeah. But respect is earned both directions. So it shouldn't be solely based on who I am and what my title is. It should also be how I treat you, how you treat me, and all that. And the reality of it is that if we go in and we teach a strict ass class and nobody's enjoying it, nobody's learning a damn thing.
Yep.
You know, so like I have two choices. I can loosen up and get everybody bought in, having fun, and give them some autonomy in the learning environment, right? And they're all going to get better, or I can be a fucking stickler and nobody's going to learn anything. Which one do I want? You know, is it about me? Or is it about them?
Exactly. Exactly. It's about them at the end of the day. And, you know, because if you're too robotic with the instruction and conveying information, it's like you're going to lose so many people, you know, and they're just going to be staring off into space, not paying attention, because like it's just like it's just a lot of mind-numbing information when they're just sitting there so not engaged in it, you know. And I think when you get them engaged, when you get them having fun and really being more hands-on, is where the majority, if not most of the growth, the majority or most of the growth happens. Because it's like the way I, you know, through all my like reading, through trying to be a better coach, and you know, and how the brain works and how we learn shit, you know, it's like we have an emotional attachment to everything that we learn. You know, whether it's a good emotional attachment or a positive emotional attachment, we tend to remember things better when we had that kind of attachment to it. Like, fuck, I still have a crazy ass triggering, like, emotional attachment to when I was, you know, a girlfriend that broke up with me back when I was 15 or something, you know? And every time the Beauty and the Beast song plays, it's like a triggering thing. It's like, fuck, she broke up with me at Disneyland at the Beauty and the Beast show. I'm like, who the fuck does that? But that's such an emotional attachment that I place it. I'll never forget that. Just like if we place an emotional attachment, like what you did with, you know, your Leos, you know, go fucking balls deep. They didn't get the actual instruction, the direct, you know, information of how to. But the minute you said balls deep, everyone fucking went balls deep and got the kick without you having to fucking explain it any further. You know, because now they're having fun, and I guarantee you they're gonna enjoy that so much more, and it's gonna stick so much better because they have that emotional attachment of enjoyment and laughter attached to that instruction.
I wasn't laughing at the misfortune of getting broken up over the Beauty and the Beast song, because it reminded me of something we had. This is an absolutely different story, but it goes back to emotional attachment. We were at this training exercise out in South Africa, and we had this lieutenant colonel with us, and I had my phone. I bought like internet so I could, you know, listen to music and stuff. And he was like, what music you got on there? I was like, hey, what do you want, sir? And we played Angel by Aerosmith. And he was like, because he requested, I was like, okay, man, you want Angel by Aerosmith? And he's like, you know, well, I was in high school. I went to this dance with this really nice girl, and we broke up right after that. And like, we're sitting there like working. He's like, God, I hate that bitch so much. Just like, I was like, dude, that's how many years ago was that? It was like 30 years ago, my man. But
I'm telling you.
but it's stuck because there's an
Yeah,
emotional attachment to it. And
exactly.
that's kind of how I learned. Like
Hmm.
you talk about the glaze over look. I brought it up so many times on the podcast that I
Hmm.
was probably one of the worst white belts known to man.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because I know, Randy knows him, but Coach Brian would like explain a move, ask 3 times if we got it. I do the head nod, like, yeah, I got it. We go right to drill it. I'd get in a
Hmm.
position, go, well, fuck. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. And just basically you could just see him just like, okay,
Yeah.
let's go over the steps one more time. Like he's just ready. Just he wouldn't, but he just, like punch me in the side of the head
Hmm.
just to get a reset or something.
Yeah.
But no, like, knowing how to relay information
Hmm.
to your students and like coaching them through
Hmm.
stuff is probably, I feel,
Yeah.
one of the more difficult things to learn when you're instructing. And like, and being funny and being silly, like both of you guys are talking about, that's
Hmm.
that's a paramount thing. I don't want to pay money to somebody and absolutely hate being in class and,
Hmm.
bow to like 5 different pictures and,
Yeah.
whatever. If you do that at your academy, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like I didn't
Oh, we
join
don't.
jujitsu to do that.
I.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't been anywhere that does that. So it's I was like, look, I'm here for
Hmm.
um like having fun while I work out and just enjoying
Yeah.
the art. Like be a part of the art.
Yep. And that's how it should be. Like we learn through our successes. We learn through our failures. Whether it's on the mat in competition or just in life in general. And I try to take that in every aspect of my coaching. Use that to collect data. And like when I tell my guys when they're competing, if it's their first tournament ever or their first tournament of the year, this specific event doesn't matter. You know how you perform, whether you win or lose, it doesn't matter. We're just trying to collect data to create a baseline for the rest of the year or the rest of your journey. See what you have to work on, where your holes are. And then and just have fun. Who cares? Don't worry about winning. If you prepared well enough, you'll win. If it's your day, you'll win. If you lose, oh well. Who cares? You got data. You got data to collect it, and then we'll start using that.
The other hard part about coaching is I don't think anybody ever
Mm.
teaches you how to coach. And so
Nope.
the ownership on learning this stuff falls on you as the coach.
Hmm.
Otherwise, people are just kind of relegated to repeating what they were taught, how they were taught, and that's not always the best way.
Hmm.
I'm like you. I did a lot of research into especially when it became my main focus at the police department for
Hmm.
4 years. That's a heavy burden. I took that very seriously. Training cops how to
Hmm.
survive, and so I wanted to learn, how do human beings learn? How is the best way
Hmm.
to set up a classroom? What's the best way for me to present the material? Like,
Hmm.
I don't want to just be in this position because I got it and then I expect to just be the best at it. Teaching
Hmm.
is a skill just like anything else we do. But unfortunately, I think that's one of the reasons why jiu-jitsu is progressing, it's blowing up and everything, but I think it could be even further along if
Hmm.
we were a little bit more deliberate about how we coach and how we learn and actually, like you said
Hmm.
earlier, check your ego,
Yeah.
pay attention to your population, study how to be a better instructor because it's not just a thing you're gifted with because you got a black belt.
Hmm.
And like, I don't know. I feel like when I if I look back, I'm so frustrated with myself
Hmm.
in teaching the old way for so many years because now
Hmm.
I can't unsee what I've seen.
Hmm.
And kind of to Rob's point about watching something get taught by steps, and then people are asked at the end of it, do you have any questions? And then somebody's going to ask a question, well, what if this and this, what if
Yeah.
that and that, what
Hmm.
if, and you're like, just stop, because none of that shit matters right now, because this is all
Yeah.
out of it's all out of context. It's all
Yeah.
out of context. You could
Yeah.
what if everything we do to death. There's a million different variables, and that's why we got to get to the
Hmm.
point of just doing fucking jujitsu. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep. No, 1,000%. And I think that's one of the biggest shortcomings of a lot of instructors, where I feel like they're at a point, whether it's just the monotony of coaching or or laziness, or or their ego tells them that they think they know it all already, that no one does continuing education. They don't put in the effort to try to become, a better coach. They're worried more about bettering themselves at jujitsu, not bettering themselves as a coach. Now, if they took that effort of, putting the time that they put in for rolling and trying to be better themselves at rolling towards coaching, I guarantee you their coaching will get so much better. In turn, their students will get so much better quicker. And and I kind of think that's what a trap that a lot of people fall into as coaches, that they're more worried about how they look. They're worried about who they're beating, and if they're at the top of the food chain in their gym and no one's like getting the best of them, their goals, their emphasis is their training. They could say it's not, but in reality, if you're still getting on the mats, and rolling, like more than you're coaching, then they're lying to themselves. They're not trying to be better as a coach, because they're not putting that time they could be putting in developing themselves on the mats, than developing themselves as a coach, which will in turn develop their athletes as better athletes at the end of the day. It's like today, like these days, like I'm hardly on the mats. I roll maybe 2 times a week, 3 at most, and that's pushing it. Because all my efforts are just all on my guys, all of my students, and growing them and growing their skills. It's, to me, it's selfish to think about it the other way, where I'm worrying about myself and how I look and who I'm able to beat up and who, am I still at the top of the food chain in my gym? And I'll be up forward. Like, I'm not the top of the food chain in my gym. I have so many of my black belts will fucking wipe the floor with me. But that was my goal. That's where I wanted to get them, and the minute I had that realization where I took a step back and stopped worrying about my training and worried more about their training, that's where I saw a huge spike in their growth and development and skill levels. That's when I started seeing, like, I was having my purple belts visiting black belts on a regular basis, and even now it's like, now I make my guys compete up, and that's where like I kind of like test the waters with them and use that as like my data collection. So again, it's like you have to kind of, in my eyes, you have to kind of make that distinction. Are you a coach or are you an athlete? To me, it's like you can't be both, and be successful at both. One, in reality, one's always going to be hurting or lacking in one area or the other. So my heavy competition days were long gone. So it's like, I'm just going to put all my effort on my guys and just really work on developing them and getting them on the biggest stages in the world.
Yeah, no, it's good to, and it's refreshing to hear somebody talk about, kind of putting aside their own training. It's, when I was coming up, it was still difficult to try to, progress myself and try to coach at the same time, just because of the situation I was in. But knowing that, you're putting your students training ahead of like yourself, like you said, it's one person can't be super successful at both. And if they are, it's very rare.
Extremely rare.
It's difficult. So, do you come up, like, you don't have to like spill the secret sauce for your guys is like, but do you come up with like individualized like training plans? Cause I know like just for what people need to work on, or like, hey, I need you to put yourself in this bad position constantly and try to figure it out from there. Or like, what do you do with that?
So, yeah. So, honestly, I don't individualize it. I have too many students. And even in my pro and amateur athletes, whether they're MMA or grappling, their body types and skill levels vary across the board. So it's I could do it, but it's a lot of work with as many people as I have. So I try to keep it as general as possible. And I use competitions as for data collecting. whether it's a sub-only competition or an actual tournament itself, like what is the constant theme I'm noticing across the board, and then that's how we'll address it. And when I tailor the training based on the rule set that we're trying to prepare for. So it's not so much individualized. I leave it up to my athletes to individualize it themselves. And for a long time, it was hard. It was difficult trying to figure out how do I do that, until I started getting into ecological dynamics and CLA, and that's where I saw the biggest explosion in my guys' skill set, in my athletes' skill sets. That's what made it easier for me, actively utilizing that in our practices is what helped it make it easy for me to be able to individualize it, but not individualize it at the same time. We're able to go, create our games around specific rule sets. Again, then looking for the very specific skills or behaviors that we're trying to develop. And I leave it up to the athlete and their own individuality or their body types to kind of self-regulate around the task focuses. So, but that's where, that's kind of like what if there's any secret sauce, which it's not secret sauce, it's just, I did my homework, I put it into practice. I failed numerous of times creating practices, and now we're here. And I have blue belts submitting, like JT Torres's black belts in competition, and so if that speaks to, if anything that speaks to, the effectiveness of utilizing, ecological dynamics, I don't know what does, and one thing that, as far as data collecting, like what I love about Jiu-Jitsu World League is that they don't just give you points for your wins. They do that for team points, but they also record how you win, right? So basically you get extra points for getting submissions, and so over the years, what I started seeing was, the better I got at creating practices based on CLA, the more or the higher the submission rate went. Like earlier this year, we had a pretty sizable team, but our points that we earned doubled both the second and third place teams combined, and we tripled their submission rates with both second and third place combined. So it's like, I know it gets shit on a lot, and it's still, even it's not as prominent today. People aren't as vocal about shitting on ecological dynamics as last year maybe. But at the end of the day, it's like, if you just did your your homework and research and put up some effort to educate themselves, and then so they would make an educated opinion, and it still wasn't for you, so be it. And that's fine. But it's like, I could tell when people make their opinions about ecological dynamics and they haven't done any of the reading or research on it, and that's the thing. And I've done enough white paper reading, I've done enough book reading and podcast listening, and to see where the bullshit is. I'm at a point, I've been doing this for a few years, and I still don't feel like I'm at a level of someone like Kevon Gonzalez or Greg Souders, guys like that are kind of like a Rob Cole, he's at the forefront of ecological dynamics in jiu-jitsu. And like, shout out to Rob. I look at him as like my mentor in all this, so, but yeah, that's like realistically, that's kind of like, if there's any secret sauce, that's it. Is like, is actually making a conscious effort at being a good like coach, utilizing CLA and actually implementing it, and and taking my L's and using those L's for data collecting to make myself better as a coach using CLA. Do I still dead drill? Rob, it's kind of earmuffs, don't listen to this, but I still do with my guys. But it's typically when it like with submission breaking mechanics, I'll have them drill. And if it's like a complicated like transition, like leg entanglements or something that has to do with like inverting, maybe like something like, I don't have the ability to create a practice to make those things emerge. Those are times I would have my guys drill, but beyond that, it's like my guys are 100%, committed to the ecological dynamics.
Yeah, I mean, Rob, I think he's probably waiting for me to jump on that one.
No, I knew exactly. I was like, yeah, I'll let Randy talk about CLA.
No, because I've been doing it. That was actually one of the times I came down to Arizona and visited your gym, Jay, was because I was down there learning about that framework to apply for law enforcement training. So I've been doing that now for like 2.5 years or so.
Nice.
And my Friday class that I coach, I don't own the gym I train at, but I coach on a Friday. That's my one day of the week, and that class for the past 2 years has been kind of like what you said, my testing ground for me to fail or succeed and learn from those lessons and manipulate things and go back to the books and go back to the white papers or listen to a podcast and figure out what do I need to manipulate to get better at this. Kind of learning to coach ecologically, I guess,
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think it's a strong lever to pull for an instructor, and it doesn't mean that I don't try to preach the gospel as if it's a gospel like that, but it's definitely something I think coaches need to at least experiment with, research, and try. Because it comes back on what we said earlier about doing your homework and caring more about your students than you care about yourself and your own development. And if you're really serious about that, there's a lot of information and things to be learned from that other side of the house that maybe coaches stray away from because it doesn't go and doesn't fit in with tradition. It doesn't massage their ego as much because you're giving the students more ability to act and make decisions on their own and develop on their own, like you said. But especially, I don't even coach dedicated competitors. I belong mostly to a hobbyist gym, and so we get to play the whole game of jiu-jitsu, and they get to learn and grow. But if I had people that were training for a specific competition, damn, CLA becomes even more powerful because, like you said, you've got rule sets now that you can use as constraints for your game, and so you can get them dialed in really well on that rule set and prepared for that competition. It was cool. The second time I came down there and I brought a couple of guys with me from the class I was in, and you were already implementing CLA. I'm like, oh, this couldn't have been more perfect. But I agree with you, man. I mean, it's such a big thing to pull. And if nothing else, it goes back on what we said at the very beginning when you talked about humor and lightening the mood and getting more buy-in. You're going to get more buy-in applying CLA principles to your practice because people are actually doing jiu-jitsu, which is what they're paying to do. And so even if for no other reason other than getting more engagement, because I see that with the cops, if I taught it the old way, I would get 2 or 3 reps out of them and they would just stare off into space and be like, I'm done. But all of a sudden now, when they have to go against another live body that has objectives and they have objectives to achieve and there's a little bit of competition in there, they're getting engagement the entire 2-hour class, the entire hour class, whatever the time frame is. And I don't get people just staring off into space anymore. They're too busy. They're too engaged. So
exactly. And it's funny if like you say that, like it's the staring off into space, because like you get that so much with kids, like while your back is turned, you're helping one set of kids. You got like 5 sets of kids behind you just dicking around. Even the adults do that shit. But yeah, like when you have them playing the games constantly, they're always like you said, engaged. They don't have a chance or an opportunity just chill and just bullshit. They have to work, and I think like you said, they're doing jujitsu, and I think that's what's most beneficial to it is like as far as like a student retention things, like it's fucking fun. They like it. They're having fun. They're gonna learn, and not to say that the IP ways of doing things was, isn't effective because it's worked for so long. No one is saying that, and that it doesn't work and it didn't work. There's just more effective ways to convey information and grow and develop the athlete or the person.
Well,
No,
and
you're
also,
sorry. Go ahead. Go
so
ahead.
the other thing with it too is when you said about people having autonomy over their own experience. If you
Mhm.
start teaching them this way, I feel like you also give them the ability to kind of like train themselves to some degree.
Mhm.
Because I have people in my gym that are like, oh man, I just feel like I'm not
Mhm.
progressing the way I want to. Mostly the higher belts, because
Mhm.
it kind of becomes like a pyramid in your gym. You get
Mhm.
fewer people up top, and you get this big group at the bottom. And sometimes the higher belts feel like they're not getting challenged the way they need to. And I'm like, well, when you come to my Friday class and I'm giving you guys these focuses of attention, do that for yourself when you're rolling with lower
Mhm.
belts. Give yourself some kind of handicap to work from or something very
Mhm.
specific that you're trying to achieve. And they don't even
Mhm.
know what it is. So they're just giving you their whole game. And now it's dual benefit because you're challenging yourself against making it more challenging to roll against somebody that's less experienced than you, but they're getting something out of it because they're rolling against somebody like you, but kind of at a
Mhm.
little bit of an advantage. So I think you give them
Mhm.
that, you get that for free too. You know what I mean?
Oh, 100%. 100%. And like what a lot of people don't understand, that's exactly what guys like Hodger Gracie and Abraham Marte had to do. When Hodger Gracie opened up his academy, he had a bunch of white belts, but he's winning worlds with a bunch of white belts as his training partners. Abraham Marte is the only black one. I think he was the only black belt in the Dominican Republic. His training partner was a blue belt, but he won worlds. Doing the same thing, self constraining him to very specific things that he wanted to develop.
I mean, and if it works, it works. And that's kind of,
Hmm.
I guess on the individual, like you said, the individual journey and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
you have to kind of take responsibility for your own training sometimes as well to make sure
Hmm.
you're doing it correctly. Because, I mean, when you hit that purple, brown, black belt level, at least in my
Hmm.
opinion, you need to be able to self regulate and know what your holes in your game are and
Hmm.
then start polishing that up. I mean, it's great to
Yep.
have a coach, truly is. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's Randy will tell you it's basically been like when Randy started doing CLA and me being going like, nah, it's shit's garbage. Terrible, stupid. I didn't say it outright, but like the
Yeah.
evolution of
Yeah.
like, I actually see a lot of benefits in that, so it is
Yeah.
kind of funny talking about it and seeing like the actual progression to it. Randy just put a
Hmm.
bunch of constraints on me to actually accept uh, the CLA method. So I think it kind of worked out
Yeah.
that way.
And what's funny is it's from back in the day when it first came out and to now, like I saw the progression of all the people that were shitting on it to now embracing it, and it's like it's hilarious, and but it's also great at the same time. It's like I think like just be open minded about it. If you really took the whole check your ego at the door mentality that jujitsu supposedly is supposed to, you know, promote, but are you really checking your ego at the door if you're going to shit on something you didn't even give it, a try to, or give it an opportunity to implement or understand and whatnot? Like I'll admit when I first when I first saw Greg Souders, my wife and I, she's one of my black belts. We were sitting in the living room watching go through YouTube channels. And we were both just like, nah, nah, no way, this horse shit. Nah, he sounds like a dick. But what was funny, I had two like epiphany moments. Um, one one of my he the first one of the first 80, I believe the first ADCC Open that came here to Phoenix about 3 years ago. One of my blue belts, who's amazing blue belt, he'll he's regularly submitted people like at brown belt, and he goes in peace. He's wiping the floor with everyone. Along comes Greg Souders guy. I'm like, I've never heard of Greg Souders. Unless instead of his videos, I don't know I've never seen any of his guys compete. It's a small school. This guy comes and cleans the floor with my guy. I'm like, what the fuck? All right, so maybe there's something to it. So I started kind of dipping my toes into it, but I still wasn't 100% sold on it. Then that same year, I believe, we had the West Coast Trials. One of my purple belts, same thing. He was competing in advanced divisions when he was a white belt and still placing. And he goes against Gavin Corbet in the last match of the date that make it to the second day. And Gavin submits my guy like that. I'm like, all right, now I think I'm 100% sold. Those are like my two epiphany moments. I'm like, that's when I started buying the books. That's when I started reading every single book, listening to every single podcast I could get my hands on. That's when I started going like at all the camps that Rob was teaching at. I would go to all of his classes, his workshops and everything he had to. I tried to find everything, even books that weren't related to, or to like jiu-jitsu, but they were related to other sports like basketball, hockey, and what are they doing with their athletes, and then I started getting like former NFL players training with me that their coaches UCLA, and I had baseball coach, pitching and batting coaches that train with me on off seasons when and they use CLA with their athletes, and they're all coaches in the NBA, no MLB, so it's like if they're doing it at that level, why aren't we doing it? They're still like when it came out, like when at least with hockey when it came out, like maybe they started doing like maybe 15 years ago, maybe longer. They got the same pushback in hockey that we are experiencing now, but yet now it's a more widely accepted method of practice in the NHL. So I just think it's just it'll take time, but I'd like to see more people take an effort, make an effort to actually try to educate themselves before just kind of discarding it and throwing it to the side.
Yeah, no, and like you said, the ego thing is kind of a huge deal, especially with like you said, if you're actually checking your ego at the door, you're going to be able to more open-minded to changing your mind. Honestly, like I feel most people should do, because just because we've done it this way the whole time doesn't make it correct. Because I mean, there's tons of practices that we were doing 15 years ago in MMA and jiu-jitsu, which are not going to work out well for, people now, because we just know better. But, I hate to end it on this note, but we've hit our time.
Yeah. Oh,
but Jay, man, we appreciate you coming on the show.
No, thanks. Thank you. No, thanks for having me. God, I feel like we could keep going on and on and on. And I love doing these things. I love podcast, chit chatting about jiu-jitsu and whatnot. And like I said, I swear I could go on for days, because to me, these are fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like Randy points out a lot, that just opens the door for another episode for you to come on and talk more about it.
Hell yeah.
And maybe it'd be kind of interesting too, Rob. I don't know about you, kind of putting you on the spot while we're live. But I think it'd be cool also maybe with some of these guests that have overlapping topics, like Jay and Rob, for example, Rob Cole. If we could do like a multi-guest collaboration,
that would be fun.
That's some wild territory I'd be into. Let's do it.
Because I think that there's so many we've been blessed this year with some phenomenal freaking guests. And when Rob said he got you on here, Jay, I was excited because I know you got all this experience, and I've had nothing but positive experiences coming to your gym. But I think it'd be cool. I think it'd be great to combine forces and have you
Yeah.
and Rob Cole on to talk about some stuff.
Oh, I know Rob would be all about that. That'd be awesome. He's so much further ahead of me in this subject matter, and I think you'd be able to get a lot of information from him.
No, I think it'd be great. So yeah, we'll discuss that. See if we can plan that out and get it working. I mean,
Oh yeah.
if I'm not put on the spot. I'm actually like that would be cool as hell to do. So let's do it then and figure it out. But
Sweet.
before we head out, where can everybody find you on social media?
So honestly, I have a Facebook page, but I'm not on Facebook very much. I'm mostly on Instagram, and it's just JAYJ Pages. And my website is www.jpagesjjmma.com.
Nice. We'll add those links in the description of the episode so everybody can find you there. But Jay, thank you very much for coming on the show. We really do appreciate it.
No, awesome. Thank you guys for having me.
Of course. And ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of the Big Jiu-Jitsu Show. You can find all of our old episodes on bigjjshow.com. You can buy some shirts, you can buy some stickers, whatever you want to do. If you want to support or you just want to listen, that's cool too. But I'm Rob.
I'm Randy.
We'll catch you guys next time.